Hi, this is Lauren from LSP Actions, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to use and add the LSP Floral Texture Overlays to an image using Photoshop CS4, CS5, CS6 or Photoshop Elements. These are the older versions, the standalone versions or the limited versions of Photoshop. If you've got Photoshop Creative Cloud, you can hop out of this tutorial and please watch the CC Creative Cloud tutorial because it's a little bit different. So here on the screen right now I have Photoshop Elements, but the same does go for Photoshop older versions of Photoshop CS4, CS5 and CS6. So make sure you click on the CS to PSE action, not the CC action. If you don't have Creative Cloud and you click on one of the CC actions, it's going to come up with some error messages which are frustrating for you. So do make sure you click on the PSE actions. I'm using this beautiful image by Anna Brand, and this is a dark background image, so I'll be using the mid to dark background section. If you're using a lighter background, please do use down here the light background application because again it's a little bit different. So click the action and hit play. Locate the texture, the floral texture you wish to use on your image. Let's have a look. I'm on the Masters Painterly. It all depends on which set that you have downloaded from the LSP Actions website, but the same rules apply for all. So resize this to suit your image and hit enter. If the action stops playing for any reason, just click it again to hit play. And when the action has finished playing, you should end up with something like this. In Photoshop Elements, CS4, CS5 and CS6, it is not possible to automatically select the subject, so you'll notice the texture is also going over your subject, which is very normal. The white layer mask of the texture is selected. This is the white box. A black brush has been, a white brush has been selected for you. You need to change this over to a black brush by clicking here on the brush and selecting black. You can change the size of your brush and the opacity. And what you need to do is start painting this texture off your subject's skin. The texture encroaching a little bit onto hair and clothing isn't so much of an issue, but of course it's up to you how much you want to erase. Because it's a layer mask, it's not exactly erasing, it's just choosing to hide certain areas. For example, if you accidentally hide a little bit too much of the texture, you can simply switch to a white brush and you can paint this back in. White means show, black means hide. And it works the same for Elements at the moment. It works the same for CS Photoshop versions. So let me just get that up here. You will need to click on a brush, black to hide, white to show. In full versions of Photoshop, you can change your brush mode here, and 100% opacity, 25% flow is what's recommended. And again, you can just brush this off your subject. You may wish to zoom in. And let's make the brush a little bit harder for a harder area, just so you can really get in and really brush this texture off the skin if needed. It really does depend on your image. One of the things you might want to watch out for is using a very, very soft brush near the edge, because you'll notice a halo kind of comes up around your subject because of the fluffy brush. So you may wish to make your brush harder. Make sure it's on black to erase and white to show. And you can just come in there and really take this off your subject's skin. Like I said, I wouldn't worry too much about the hair or the clothing unless it's a very heavy texture that you've used, in which case you might want to definitely come and take that off certain areas. You can play with your brush hardness, your brush opacity, your brush flow, zooming in and out, really to make that selection work for you. If you have X on the keyboard, your finger on X, you can switch between black and white nice and easily. So black to show, hide, and white to show like this. It's really, really helpful. If you are used to using Photoshop layer masks, this will be really simple for you. If you're a beginner or you haven't done anything like this before, it takes a little bit of practice, but it really is quite simple once you know how. So next up, you can take a look at the other layers that have been created in your Layers panel. If you can't see your Layers panel, come up here to Window and choose Layers. And the same with Elements as well, works exactly the same. Over your Layers panel, you have some additional layers to play with. You have fader paint, and you'll see this is a black layer mask, which means you need a white brush to paint this on. And then you have some invisible layers here, which you can turn on by clicking in the little box and you see an eye appears. So you have saturation, so you can turn this on or off. And if you double click the icon, you'll get the hue and saturation box pop up. So you can change the saturation, you can make it stronger, you can make it calmer, you can change the colours just by having a play here. That's only if you really want to. If not, you can just, if it's good the way it is, you can just leave that one. Above this you have intensify, you can turn this on or off to really make that background look intense. And then you have lift and brighten, just what it says on the tin, and darken and deep, darken it down a little bit. And again, you can click on these boxes. If you're okay using levels, you can just play with these. But let's go back here to the fader paint. Now what this does, it allows you to fade areas of the texture. So for example, if there's some texture that was encroaching onto the clothing that you wish to fade, you can just dab this on, and without changing the colours of the texture, it will really kind of add some fading there. Like this. So you might just choose to have the texture showing a little bit in certain areas, using a black to hide and a white to show the fading, and a black to hide the fading. You can see there, that's if you really wanted to use that one. Lots of things you can do here. So you can play around with your selection, change the settings here to make this image really, the texture really work for your image. Underneath here on the bonus extras, I'm just going to switch over to button mode. So if you're in CS versions of Photoshop, you can use button mode. If you're on Action, PSE, put my teeth in, you can't, unfortunately. And you see down here we have add floral to beanbag fabric. There is a separate tutorial for this one, so if you're a newborn photographer, you want to add these floral textures to the beanbag, click that one. And here you have add floor perspective. Now this one is really cool, it's a guided action. So you hit play, and it says first step 1, select the main texture layer in your layers panel. So make sure you've selected here, click on the actual texture and hit play again. Now it's asking to select the marquee tool. The marquee tool is like the little rectangular dotted line up here. And draw kind of a selection up until the point where the background, the seamless backdrop meets the floor and flares out. So it'll be about there. And hit the action again. Now it's selected perspective, so you need to grab one of the bottom corners, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, whichever you prefer, and start to drag this out. And you will see it's turning the perspective of the texture. Hit enter again, and the action has finished. So now you can see this has added a perspective to your action, which can look really very, very effective. And you can continue painting the action on or off your subject. You can continue editing any way you like. Let's take the fade off there, you can see that perspective a little better. So you can see the action hits the floor, and the layer hits the floor and spreads out, which is really nice and effective. You also have some extra actions here, so click your texture first. Always click the texture before playing these bonuses. You have cool toning, which can look really, really pretty if you want to cool the image down a little bit. You have vintage toning, which does what it says, it adds that vintage tone to your image. We have a dusty vignette which you can add, which really brings a beautiful darkness around the edges. A black brush is selected, so you can paint this off certain areas, and you can paint it on again with a white brush if you wish to add that darkness in. There's really lots you can do with these actions, very, very powerful. So turn that before and after. If you're adding the textures to a very light or pale or even a white background, you're going to want to come down into the light and pale background section to add this in. Remember, don't use the CC one, it will come up with error messages. Make sure you click on the PSE light background. A little bit to remember, but as long as you just take a second or two just to double check you're on the right action first, everything will work really well. So make sure you play the CS to PSE light background applicator and choose the background for your image. You can resize sideways, you could go make it wider if your image is landscape instead of portrait, so just resize that to fit your image and the action will play out. And you'll see it has overlaid nicely onto your image. The main difference with adding to a very light background as to a normal mid-tone or dark background, mid-tones are definitely the best to be able to use, is that the blend mode will be multiply. You can always try and overlay blend mode if you wanted to and turn that one up, but I find with the very, very light backgrounds, a multiply works really well. So make sure you're on the layer mask with a black brush selected, and you can start painting this off your subject's skin and any other areas that you wish to hide. So we're just coming in there. And there we go, and you can see that my painting has left a slight halo around the edge of the subject. So I'm just going to come in with a white brush, make it nice and firm, and just bring this in around the edges here. All depends on your image, and it depends on the texture that you're using when it comes to how much of the texture actually comes across onto your subject's skin and how much of a halo you wish to leave. I'm just going to come in quickly. I recommend you do take time to adapt this properly. I'm going to click on Fader Paint here just to adapt it a little bit more, so make sure you're on the black box, white brush selected, and I'm just going to use Fader Paint just here on the shoulder and anywhere else that needs it. And that's just going to take some of the pattern out of the texture, but keeping the colours and the tones intact. So it's kind of like a two-prong approach that you can use to adding textures to your image. If any of it ends up going on the skin and it's hard to make a selection, come up onto Fader Paint and use that instead, just to fade it all in. I'm just going to fade that whole petal out actually, may as well. Okay, and you can change the opacity of Fader Paint to suit if you want it to come in full or just a little bit there. And that's how to add your image, your texture, to a lighter background image. I'm going to play the add floor perspective as well, because we have a full-length image here with floor included, so it's quite important to do this, I think. So click on the texture layer and hit continue, hit play again. Grab the marquee, it gives you instructions every step of the way, and draw this up to the level, the whole bottom of your image up to the level of the point where the floor meets the wall, and hit play again. Now it's pulled up the perspective transform, so I'm just going to pull this out here just until that perspective really does match the image, and hit enter, and it's done. So now you can see the texture has adapted to the floor there, so just a handy little action to have that one. I'm just going to add some more of the texture around here, so you can go in and carry on tweaking if you want to, just to make that texture really work. And again, you have colour match, enriching the image paint if you wanted to do this. You have darken, lift and brighten, intensify, all these different options here that you can play with, the same as if you were adding to a dark background. And you can take the opacity, change the opacity to suit, and you can play with different textures for different images. This beautiful shot here is by Magda Bright, and really very cute. So that's how to use the Photoshop Actions to apply the textures in Photoshop PSE Elements and CS versions. These are not the subscription-based Photoshop. So if you use CC, you can watch the CC tutorial, because that has got a little bit more in-depth subject selection, which works really well. If you want to know how to manually add these textures to your image without using the actions to just drag and drop and mask, you can watch video number 6, where I show you how to do that, and that works whether you've got Photoshop Elements, one of the CS versions, or Creative Cloud. It doesn't matter which version you've got, that video will work for all. And that's a video without using the actions. So if you want to know how to do it without the actions, a little bit fiddlier because the actions do a lot for you, but sometimes it is important to know how to do this manually. So please do watch video number 6 if you want to learn how to do that. If you're a newborn photographer and you want to add these florals to your baby bean backdrops, please do watch video number 7. I'm Lauren, thanks for watching.